Global markets and US trading partners are bracing as President Donald Trump prepares to unveil sweeping new import taxes. Trump says all countries could be hit with new tariffs to offset what he sees as a trading disadvantage for US companies. The specifics of who would be targeted and by how much are still uncertain, but the White House press secretary said they would come into effect immediately after they are announced tomorrow. The EU's chief executive, Ursula von der Leyen, said the European Union had a strong plan to retaliate against the US tariffs.
Europe has not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate. But if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate and we will use it.
All right, let's get more from our correspondents in Washington, D.C., Janelle Dumalaon, and our correspondent in Strasbourg, Lucia Schulten. Janelle, the White House is saying that these tariffs will start immediately after Trump announces them on Wednesday. What is the feeling about these tariffs in the U.S.? What are people, what are the markets expecting?
Anya, I can tell you that ahead of Liberation Day here in the United States, people are not feeling a lot of excitement at being liberated, I must say. The mood is very tense indeed. And it's because nobody knows what to expect exactly. Both consumers, markets, they are waiting with bated breath for this potential bad news. And, you know, in a way, it's because we don't know what exact form these tariffs are going to take. Are we talking about universal tariffs going to apply to anything and everything coming from other countries at a single rate? Are we talking about reciprocal tariffs where Trump seeks to match dollar by dollar the tariffs that are levied by other countries? And in a way, it's that uncertainty that is almost worse for markets, for businesses, and for consumers than what the actual policy is going to be. I've spoken to many concerned businesses. I've spoken to consumers who are waiting on making big spending decisions in anticipation, perhaps, of having to save. Now, but based on what he's already done so far, you know, he already announced those 25% car tariffs, tariffs on imported cars and on imported car parts. So he's already shown that he's prepared to take really sweeping action. And that is something that is going to impact affordability, which of course is ironic considering that lots of voters voted for Donald Trump because they thought he would be the man to get prices under control.
So sweeping action about to happen on, as you say, what he's calling Liberation Day. What is his strategy, though? What is it that he wants to achieve in the long term with these tariffs, Janelle?
Well, he has a long-standing history with this, and I think we're all pretty much familiar with the general outlines. Donald Trump very much sees tariffs as a negotiation tool with other trading partners around the world. He sees it as a potential revenue source. He has talked about how it is something that he would be able to employ in order to restore the vitality of the manufacturing sector in regions in America that he feels has been hollowed out by free trade. There has also been some talk about how he might use revenues generated from his tariff policies to perhaps fund tax rebates for American taxpayers, or even pay out dividends to American citizens. But of course, we don't know whether these theories are going to kind of pan out the way that he thinks he will. I think it's fair to say that what he wants to do here is really remake the world economy according to what he views the correct principles are. And I don't think that's an understatement at all.
Now, Brussels says it is prepared for the tariffs and has its response ready. Lucia, we heard Ursula von der Leyen saying, didn't we, that Brussels has a strong plan. How confident is Brussels, though, that its response will have an effect, will have the desired effect?
Yeah, we have been hearing from Ursula von der Leyen that there is a strong plan. She has not been giving any details how this plan actually looks like. So here in Strasbourg, people do expect that this might be a counter-terrorist. But we have also heard from Ursula von der Leyen today, and that we have heard again and again, that the European Union would like to see a negotiated solution. So they would much rather sit down with Donald Trump and the administration and find a solution instead of having these tariffs, which they call also a lose-lose situation for both sides. I already said that it might be counter tariffs. As I've also said, it's not so clear what the plan actually implies. There are some people, especially here in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, that have been calling out for levies on digital services. Many of the digital services come from the United States, and some here are saying it might be a good idea to collect a levy and to strike back in that way, but it is far from clear if this will happen.
All right. And Janelle, is Trump listening? Does Trump care that the EU is talking about a tough response?
You know, Anya, I think there's a little to indicate that he does. You know, what we know about Trump, he really does see international relations. He does see international trade as a zero-sum game. He sort of has divided the world into countries that hold cards and countries that don't. And this is very much a situation where he looks at the U.S., the size of the U.S. market. He looks at the EU and its dependence on the EU market and thinks, well, in this situation, the U.S. is the one that has the cards. You know, and this is despite the fact that a lot of European industry already does what he wants. So German car makers already have a sizable manufacturing presence in the U.S. But all of this appears to be making little difference to Trump as he goes on with his bluster. He has said many times that he would be prepared to counter whatever the EU is countering with his own measures. And I think we could be very much in danger of a retaliatory spiral if and when these policies come to pass.
Lucia, just give us a sense of how European businesses are feeling about what might be about to hit them.
Yeah, Janelle said it earlier. It's a lot about uncertainty, and this is also the case here in the European Union. So in the end, what the tariffs mean for the businesses will really depend on how these tariffs look like. So as long as this is uncertain, it's also very hard for businesses to do their business, to make plans for the future. There's also another fear here in the European Union, or especially in Germany, that companies might move even more to the US. As Janelle said, there are already a lot of automotive there's a lot of automotive companies which are already in the US, and that more companies would follow this and move to the US to do their business from there. And then others say, well, it's not that easy. Not everyone can just move all of their business to the US. So there is clearly a lot of sense of uncertainty here in the European Union. And I'm sure everyone is sitting there tonight to see what Donald Trump actually comes up with and which sectors will be hit, or if all of them would be hit.
Thanks so much to you, Lucia Schulten, reporting from Strasbourg, and to Janelle Dumalaon, reporting from Washington, D.C. Thanks to you both. For more on all of this, we can speak to Jens Korte, a business correspondent based in New York. Good to see you there, Jens. Trump is calling this Liberation Day, but people and the markets are worried. Are they right to be worried?
Yeah, Anya, everybody is pretty much holding their breath at this point, and rightfully so, because what we might be getting is not just a few tariff increases as we've seen 8 years ago, but actually those might be the most striking tariffs since World War II. So there is definitely a lot at stake at this point.
So why do you think he is doing this? I mean, what do you see Trump's strategy as being with these tariffs?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a couple of factors. I mean, one reason what the U.S. administration is saying is creating some income. One of the most important figures is Peter Navarro. He's one of the main guys behind the tariffs of the new administration. And he's talking about that the U.S. might actually get an additional revenue of $600 billion per year. So over a course of 10 years, that would add up to $6 trillion. But a lot of economists are saying, well, actually, that might come out as a tax to U.S. consumers. I mean, then also U.S. President Donald Trump might get something in return from other countries if he to avoid those tariffs. But bottom line is there are probably also some political reasons why the U.S. administration is putting so much pressure on allies and foes alike with this tariff policy.
And what do people think about this? Because, I mean, as you say, consumers are likely to be affected? So I know that the US obviously has many different opinions politically, but I mean, in general, what is the public attitude to these kind of tariffs?
Well, I mean, if you look at surveys, the supporters of Donald Trump still support Donald Trump, but then again, they haven't really felt the full impact of those tariffs yet. But you already see it if you look at consumer confidence. If you look at consumer spending, we already do see some hesitation. So it already starts having an effect. Uncertainty is hardly good for anybody, and that's what we're already seeing at this point.
Now, Brussels is threatening to retaliate to these tariffs. As we heard, Ursula von der Leyen says the European Union has a strong plan to retaliate. Does Trump care about that?
It doesn't seem that way, Anya. And I mean, first of all, if you look at the United States, other than the European Union, the US does not really depend on exports that much. And then again, US President Donald Trump has already hinted if the EU, for example, should retaliate, I mean, then he would even bring those tariffs further up. So it does not seem that Donald Trump is very impressed by those words out of the European Union.
Jens Korte in New York. Jens, thanks so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.